Enki, whose equivalent title is Ptah, and his counterpart who held the title Bes, were distinct beings of different orders, some from Rigel, some from Orion, who arrived on Earth and began experimenting with the planet's original inhabitants. They were building pyramids as part of the Sumerian doctrine, which many mistakenly believed was the final path, only to find that the very pyramids they revered illustrated contradictions in their teachings. Enki, Ptah, and his colleagues performed genetic manipulations on the homegrown species, what you might think of as the ancient human stock, by abducting and interbreeding them with their own genetic material. Their goal was to create hybrid avatars with compatible DNA, so an Anunnaki consciousness could incarnate seamlessly. This was how they replicated themselves here, blending their genes with ours. Over time, different groups of these hybrids emerged, each with varying proportions of Anunnaki, Draconian, and terrestrial DNA, much like the diverse tribal features we see today across Africa, where 7 major genetic strands once existed but only one migrated out to populate the Americas. Around 8,500 years ago, Mother Ninti began using her own DNA to experiment further in Mesopotamia, creating creatures on Pata, Earth, that could not reproduce without mixing with the pure Nagaru line, that is, our original ancestors. Meanwhile, in Africa, Mother Sacrament, consort and daughter of Reyes, successfully bred a self-sustaining hybrid population some 24,000 years ago. By 6,000 years ago, the perfected formula resulted in what we now recognize as the Caucasus. The biblical creation of Adam and Eve is a later, plagiarized retelling of these far older African origin myths, adapted over millennia through translations of the Torah, Bible, and Quran. Enki and his colleague Ninti constructed circular DNA fragments, each larger than 9,000 base pairs, that could replicate autonomously once hidden within Anunnaki genetic structures. When Todd discovered and misused these, the blueprint spread to the Pleiadians, who then added artificial proteins to bacterial DNA, escalating the complexity of these hybrid experiments. This story also explains the sacred food for God doctrine found in our holy texts, a compromise between Pata and his renegade creations. Rather than consuming the original beings, they engineered a new life form called Mukasu as a sustainable food source. The bloody sacrificial rituals commanded in Leviticus, Jeremiah, and 2 Kings reflect this ancient agreement, a God who demands flesh and blood as offerings because it symbolizes dominion over life and death, even if a purely spiritual deity could not smell or taste it. All of this blurs the line between the physical and the spiritual. The so-called spirit or soul that inhabits our bodies is an emanation from higher dimensions, what we call the exoplasmic partner, while the Anunnaki avatars created by genetic science were purely physical vessels. When 200 fallen angels descended, they too took on these avatars, since their original bodies were ill-suited to Earth's single-sun environment and atmospheric bacteria. Without engineered immunity, they would have perished. This is why religion so often tells us to accept doctrines on faith, without questioning the origins of God, devil, or the emotional constructs like pride and ego. We've inherited stories of worship from countless cultures, from Hindu deities in India to Zeus in Greece, then rebranded them in Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. Yet if we examine the contradictions, why an omnipotent God would create temptation, evil, or suffering, we see that blind faith has been used to suppress inquiry. All of a sudden, when something goes wrong, you say, well, I must have been slipping. This is religion, this is what religion breeds. Now, is there such a thing as an afterlife? What does that mean to you? Is heaven and hell real? Let's first acknowledge that the traditional concepts of heaven is up and hell is down come to us through religious teachings. But if hell is down, and if, according to Christian tradition, the devil was once in heaven before being cast down, does that mean the devil resides on earth? If so, could earth itself be considered a form of hell? We might think of hell not only as a place beyond this life, but also as a state of mind or a condition here and now. Imagine children in a burn unit, suffering third-degree burns, undergoing constant treatment yet enduring immense pain. Could this not be their personal hell? Similarly, when our societies fracture and people can't come together, isn't that a kind of hell on earth? We don't need an afterlife to experience hell. It is present in our everyday struggles. Conversely, those who accumulate wealth and power create a kind of heaven on earth for themselves. The luxury cars, the lavish homes, the smiles that mask deeper inequities. For them, this world is heaven, while for others, it is hell. The notion of eternal punishment or reward after death was formulated by ancient Mesopotamian priests to control people through fear. Since no one can prove the existence of fire, brimstone, or floating cherubim, these ideas function as a mythology, a series of opinions masquerading as divine truths. If we define hell as a form of ignorance, then being disconnected from our true selves, our ancestry, our history, is a kind of hell. Not knowing who we are, what our culture teaches us, is to languish in darkness. If we accept ideologies without question, believing in Santa Claus-like figures who judge us from afar, we remain trapped by fear of punishment. Instead of living by others' rules, we should understand our own natural laws and the rhythms of nature, stepping into our maturity when nature calls us to do so, not when man-made laws grant us certain privileges. When you were born, did you begin to live or to die? Biologically, each breath you take is a step toward death, but your spirit and mind, your essence, do not depend on oxygen. Energy cannot be destroyed, it only changes form. Before you entered this physical existence, you were already part of an eternal energy. When your body dies, your spirit persists, no longer bound by the limitations of flesh. Science teaches us that atoms, once thought indivisible, consist of protons, neutrons, and electrons, which in turn consist of quarks and even smaller particles. Below the physical level lies pure energy, the spiritual realm. Like water transforming into steam or ice, matter changes state but never ceases to exist. At death, your solid form dissolves back into pure spiritual energy. Your mind and your brain are distinct. The brain is physical matter, but the mind occupies the spiritual realm. Your awareness of your own existence, this self-knowing, is evidence that your spirit already transcends the physical. When you die, then, you return to that fuller energy state. But not every spirit moves on immediately. Attachment to the physical, desires, lusts, and fears, can trap a spirit on this plane, creating another form of hell, a restless, earthbound existence. That is why people report sightings of apparitions in graveyards. Some spirits cannot or will not let go. Spiritual growth, then, involves learning to release lower forces and connect with higher ones, our true ancestors and allies in the unseen realms. This is not about fear of punishment, it is about understanding the fleeting nature of the physical and exercising our spiritual heritage. As for racial or genetic differences, understanding one's ancestry and the mixtures of genes is not racism. Racism is hate, an emotional response. Ontology, on the other hand, studies being, knowing your own seed, as one would know one's craft. If someone labels you a racist for caring about your people, simply say you are protecting your own lineage. Judgments about others should be based on actions, not skin color. Currently, our challenge is to wake up our people, to teach one another, and to live according to our nature rather than the foreign systems imposed upon us. Just as ancient overlords or star beings may have observed us, today we have our teacher and our cultural heritage guiding us into the next cycle of existence. It is up to each of us to diagnose where we stand and how we will move forward. The afterlife is both a present reality of spiritual energy and a future transition beyond physical death. Heaven and hell exist within and around us, shaped by our beliefs, our sufferings, and our connections. By reclaiming our true knowledge of self, energy, and spirit, we transcend fear-based myths and step into our rightful place in the great cycle of existence. The struggle we face is global, not just here in America. For centuries, outsiders, what we call the Mukasu, have subtly supplanted authentic African teachings, supplanting our true spiritual matrix with synthetic beliefs and practices. Their goal has been to break down our ancestral messages, as documented in Tying Into the Vines, and to destroy the integrity of our race. They've done this most recently within the last lunar cycle, but their work has been ongoing for millennia. Now, as the energy shift approaches, Africa is poised to become the spiritual center of the world once again, and it's our responsibility, as those who are waking up, to guide African minds back to the ways of our ancestors, which long predate imported religions. When our master teacher arrived in 1967, we weren't ready. It took 30 years merely to decondition ourselves from the imposed religious framework. Now we face another 30 years to reintegrate Wu-Sabat, our sacred knowledge, into our collective consciousness, to study and preserve our race as ontologists or scientists of our own heritage. This is no quick fix or magic wand. It is a process as natural as the cycles of the earth, and it will unfold in our lifetime if we commit ourselves to it. Within our tradition, we recognize two forces, one good, one bad, and we all express aspects of both. Devil means to deviate from nature's divine plan. As Africans, our vibration and faith are defined by our natural origin. Anything synthetic, fake fruit, bleached skin, hair straightened beyond its natural texture, represents a deviation from our matrix and is therefore evil. This evil is not the religious devil of imported mythologies, but the work of those who would control our minds by replacing natural life with artificial substitutes. Even the stories of God, angels, and devils in the Bible were borrowed from Sumerian tablets that describe wars among star systems. As our master teacher revealed in his book God and Extraterrestrial, the angels and winged cherubs are references to physical beings from Orion, or Oranos in the Greek text of the Lord's Prayer. When we recite Our Father who art in heaven, The word translated as heaven is actually Oranos, a 7-star system. The prayer invites Orion's kingdom to manifest on Earth, just as it is in Orion, if we understand its original language and context. Reincarnation, too, is a natural law. To incarnate is simply to inhabit flesh, our cardinal existence, and to reincarnate is to return to that physical plane for further growth or specific missions. Our consciousness becomes stamped in matter until we outgrow our attachments or fade from the cycle. When people ask who or what God is, we must first understand their background. Many imagine a white-robed man in the sky, a story left unchecked until it becomes real in the mind. A rumor, if unexamined, can become the ruling force in one's life. We were brought from Africa, forbidden to practice our ways, and taught to worship this imported God, to pray, to believe, to fear, and to love Him, states of consciousness that, in Africa, were originally expressions of divine love for all existence and for our ancestors. Freemasonry, often seen as esoteric or Christian, actually derives from ancient Egyptian rites. While modern American Freemasonry is a Caucasian adaptation, the true degrees, entered apprentice, fellow craft, master mason, and shrine, originated with our people. Our ancestors entrusted the Mukasu with 3 degrees to shape them, but we have our own sacred societies that preserve the genuine brotherhood and sisterhood teachings. All of this, the reclamation of our spiritual heritage, the restoration of our natural way of life, the recovery of authentic knowledge, cannot be rushed. It demands commitment, study, and the patient work of unraveling centuries of imposed beliefs. But in doing so, we will restore Africa to its rightful place as the world's spiritual center and reclaim the divine plan that has always been our birthright. From the earliest moment of our lives, we acted from love, an unfiltered, intuitive sense of connection with the universe, long before anyone taught us about God or faith. As children, we sensed beauty and wonder without needing a doctrine. Yet at some point, a teacher asked us to affirm whether or not there is a God, as though our very existence depended on it. In truth, the concept of God had already taken root in us through culture and instruction. We didn't invent it ourselves. We were born trusting and loving, then taught to have faith, belief without reasoning, in a deity we could not verify. But belief and faith are not the same. Belief is accepting something you don't know, whereas faith is trusting something whether or not it's confirmed. This distinction matters because faith, when imposed upon us, reduces our natural state of love and curiosity to one of fear and compliance. We learn that if we obey our master, our religious leaders, our societal authorities, we will go to heaven. If we disobey, we will burn in hell. In this binary framework, our attention shifts from love to fear. Fear of divine judgment, fear of police, fear of losing jobs or homes, fear of tomorrow's uncertainties. Hope is offered as a counterbalance, hope for salvation, for a better life, but it too hinges on external forces rather than our own inherent power. Our master teacher reminds us that the real helping hand is at the end of our own arm. We ourselves are divine, connected directly to our ancestors. We need not look to churches or Sunday sermons to receive guidance. Our DNA is the radio and receiver that links us to a cosmic lineage of advanced beings, our true teachers. Over millennia, this link has been corrupted by malware in the form of dogma and ignorance, jamming our ancestral broadcasts. The role of a great being, one who incarnates roughly every 24,000 years, is to clean this malware from our genetic system, reminding us of our profound intelligence, intel in genes, and restoring our ability to receive ancestral knowledge. This process of reawakening is tied to the cycles of creation and to cataclysmic events like solar flares. Just as Mother Nature sends out radiation that can both heal and harm, so too do our bodies, structured in 3 sections on each finger, limb, chakra, resonate with specific frequencies. Chanting the tones F, A, and C, we align with Earth, F, our bodies, A, and natural law, C. When in harmony, solar radiation becomes a source of healing. When out of tune, it accelerates decay. True spiritual practice, overstanding rather than mere academic understanding, requires full application of these principles. Our nutritional and energetic choices also have cosmic implications. The same forces that feed on human negativity encourage us to lower our vibrations through smoking, drinking, or consuming toxic foods, making us more like the predatory beings described in ancient texts, draconians who prey on lower frequency meat. By maintaining a high-frequency lifestyle, clean diet, harmonious sound, clear intention, we remove ourselves from their radar and become impervious to their manipulations. These truths have been obscured by grafted religious stories. Characters like Moses, Noah, and even Jesus and Muhammad are, in many cases, composites or later inventions derived from earlier Sumerian, Egyptian, and Hebrew myths. Their names and narratives were adapted, Moses from the Egyptian Mos, student, Noah meaning rest, to serve a doctrine that justified power structures. Likewise, the sons of God who took the daughters of men in Genesis chapter 6 refer to extraterrestrial visitors, Anunnaki or Panathari, whose interbreeding with local races produced a hybrid class alien to our true lineage. Our task is twofold: to remember who we really are, children of supreme beings with an unbroken line to cosmic ancestors, and to apply that remembrance in daily life. By cleaning our genetic computers, by harmonizing our frequencies, and by rejecting fear-based dogma, we liberate ourselves collectively. The help we seek is already within us. Our destiny is to reclaim our sovereignty and join the universal community of conscious beings. When we break down the word alchemy, we discover its roots in two elements: the Arabic definite article al, meaning the or mighty, and chem, the ancient Egyptian word for black or earth. Put together, al-chem, it literally means the black earth, a reference not only to the fertile soil of Kemet, the black land of ancient Egypt, but also to the pigment-like substance that alchemists believed held the secrets of transformation. Over time, alchemy evolved linguistically into our modern word chemistry. In antiquity, practitioners of alchemy were far more than simple metallurgists. They were engineers of matter, masters of formulas that manipulated the very corpuscles of substances. They learned to transmute base metals, lead, tin, iron, into precious ones, most famously gold. This quest for gold gave rise to the term fool's gold for the counterfeit materials they sometimes produced. In fact, the book of Genesis, 2:11, refers to a land whose rivers yielded good gold, implying by contrast that other gold might be inferior or impure, just as later jewelers distinguished 10-carat or 14-carat alloys from true 24-carat bullion. But alchemy was never merely about metallurgy. Its deeper aim was spiritual transmutation, the refinement of the seeker's own soul from a base state into something luminous. Ancient Egyptian initiates believed that by aligning themselves with cosmic tones or vibrations, they could ascend into beings of light, an art as much metaphysical as physical. They coated sacred spaces and apparatus with gold not just for its beauty or resilience against the sun's heat, but because gold's radiant properties symbolized, and indeed harnessed, pure solar energy. Just as medieval Europeans mined gold and gems with difficulty, ancient engineers devised synthetic processes. Though these man-made metals were never quite as good as those drawn from the earth, the Egyptians experimented with early forms of crucibles and chemical reactions to reduce reliance on dangerous mining. They also discovered the unique properties of crystals, quartz, sardonyx, emerald, ruby, that later generations would refine into lasers and semiconductors. Their chamier, ruby, stones, cut precisely, could concentrate light much like modern laser optics. Their understanding of carbon's transformation under pressure foreshadowed our knowledge of diamonds and silicon. Beyond minerals, the ancients engineered vast solar boats or man jets, hovering vessels powered by ambient electromagnetic or tachyon energy drawn from the Earth's subtle grid. Accounts of such flying apparatus appear not only in Egyptian texts but also in Mesopotamian epics, where they are called shams, and Hindu scriptures like the Bhagavad Gita, where similar craft are termed vimanas. These cross-cultural echoes suggest a shared, prehistoric mastery of mechanical engineering and energy manipulation long before the Wright brothers or even Leonardo da Vinci. Unfortunately, much of this lore was suppressed or misrepresented over millennia. The Great Library of Alexandria, raised during Julius Caesar's era, likely contained papyri detailing these arts. Later, European colonizers rewrote African and Mesopotamian histories, casting indigenous practices as superstition and recasting African priests as sorcerers. Words like sorcery and pharmacy both derive from Greek terms for drugs, yet Western narratives turned black into evil, black magic, black market, blackmail, and white into good, inverting the symbolism the ancients employed. Modern chemistry and physics are rediscovering what our forebears already knew, that by mastering the interplay of elements and vibrations, matter and energy can be interconverted. We store data on hard drives thanks to quartz's piezoelectric properties. We harness solar power with silicon cells once mined from the same quartz veins that ancient Egyptians revered. We use diamonds not only as gemstones but as the cutting edge of laser technology and high-pressure research. As we sift through layers of corrupted history, it becomes clear that alchemy was never a primitive precursor to chemistry but a profound synthesis of science, spirituality, and philosophy. Its legacies, our periodic table, our semiconductor chips, our solar panels, are all but forgotten reflections of an age when human ingenuity was intertwined with cosmic harmony. By revisiting these roots, we not only honor the ingenuity of Kemet, Sumer, and the Indus Valley but also reclaim a vision of knowledge that unites matter and mind, earth and sky, science and soul. In the modern world, you're watching Batman, Superman, Captain America, Spider-Man, grown men in tights and capes, their muscles unrealistically bulging, and loving every second of it. As a child, You draw your favorite hero with exaggerated biceps, veins popping, leotard tight, and you don't realize you're absorbing a subliminal message. That dressing up in capes and tights is not only normal, but desirable. You play pretend, wrapping yourself in bed sheets, brandishing whatever makeshift weapon you can find, utterly enthralled, and completely unaware that pop culture has quietly reshaped your idea of masculinity and attraction. It's the same with sweets. Your mom gives you candy because it's easy, convenient, and makes you happy in the moment, so you devour sugary treats without a second thought. Years later, when your teeth ache and your gums recede, you wonder why you never stopped. Sugar lingered in your mouth, rotting enamel. It overwhelmed your body's ability to regulate glucose, led to insulin resistance, then type 2 diabetes. Soon you're on medications to manage blood sugar, dialysis looming on the horizon, your liver struggling under the weight of pills. Side effects pile up, you lose libido, your relationships falter, and you find yourself on yet more medications for heart problems, vision loss, nerve damage. You end up an 80-something patient on 20 daily pills, bewildered by the chain reaction set off by a childhood habit you never questioned. Pop culture fosters other dependencies too. James Dean and Neo smoked on screen, so you light up, puff by puff packing your lungs with tar. Decades later, you're diagnosed with emphysema or lung cancer, gasping for breath in your 70s, wishing you'd never tried to look cool. You see your heroes clinking glasses in casinos, sipping Patron, so you start chasing that high, turning to alcohol to blur your nerves. But as dependency grows, your liver and heart deteriorate, you swap one set of prescriptions for another, a spiral of side effects that leaves you sicker than before. Skin and hair products promise style, waves, straightening, color, but clog your pores and strip your scalp, triggering eczema or hair loss by your late 20s. Nightclubs beckon with booming bass frequencies that jolt your nervous system. When anxiety creeps in, you reach for another cigarette, another drink, convinced only vice can steady your nerves, never realizing the very culture you consume has unbalanced them. You ink yourself with tattoos, symbols lifted from heavy metal bands, occult imagery, pop heroes, never pausing to ask why. You think it's self-expression, but it's just another brand imprint, another script written by forces that profit from your compliance. Hollister shirts and designer knockoffs parade across your chest, yet you're hardly aware that your fashion choices come from boardrooms, not your soul. We've inherited all this as part of American culture: movies, sugar, cigarettes, alcohol, synthetic products, loud music, even the inks in our skin. We're told it's cool, modern, liberating, but it's a carefully crafted system of distractions and dependencies. It preys on our desires, shaping how we see ourselves and what we need. It wears us down physically and mentally, then sells us the cures. Breaking free means questioning every cultural norm you've internalized since childhood. Stop accepting the next superhero reboot as harmless fun. Ask who benefits, who profits from your fandom. Choose real nourishment over empty calories. Mindfully decide what you put in, on, and around your body. Reclaim your identity from marketers and filmmakers, and reconnect with traditions that honor health, community, and genuine self-knowledge. Because if you don't, you'll keep playing the same game, swapping one set of illusions for another, never realizing you're the one paying the price: your health, your autonomy, your very life. It's time to unplug from the manufactured narratives, clean out the junk from your system, and write your own story. It's entirely possible for some people to perceive dimensions or beings beyond our usual three-dimensional reality because they're simply more finely attuned, vibrating, in effect, at a higher frequency than most of us. Through practices like meditation, and, yes, disciplined prayer, one learns to quiet the mind, lower bodily tension, and deepen awareness so that subtle lights or energy forms become visible, and so that interdimensional or extrasensory intelligences can make contact. In dreams, too, the reduced filtering of waking consciousness allows those on other wavelengths to reach us. Scientific experiments in Kirlian or aura photography demonstrate that our bodies constantly emit electromagnetic energy patterns, even when part of the physical form, say, a hand, is missing, its energy signature remains. This parallels how bees see ultraviolet patterns on flowers we cannot. We humans normally perceive only a narrow band of the electromagnetic spectrum, but with training, inner discipline, some people extend that range. Historically, and according to certain esoteric teachings, early humans possessed a now atrophied gland, sometimes called the Barther or pineal gland, that enabled 4 higher senses, including telepathy. Remnants of those nerve endings survive in genuine psychics today, enabling them to tap in where most of us cannot. But modern technology, cell phones, implanted chips, and soon neural interfaces, threatens to replicate or even supplant those natural capacities, delivering thought-to-thought communication artificially. Yet mechanical noise, air conditioners, fluorescent lights, combustion engines, does interfere with the airwaves of mind, just as radio static garbles a broadcast. That's why revitalizing our inner tuning is crucial, to reclaim those faculties that once lay dormant in our species. We must study our bodies, how melanin responds to light and sound, how our organs resonate, to learn to dial in our own station once again. All of this ties into a larger movement of reconnection with our African origins, an awakening to ancestral languages, spiritual practices, and communal bonds. 40 centuries of forced exile and imposed doctrines severed us from our native frequencies, cutting tongues, literally forbidding ancestral speech, blinding eyes, deafening ears to the true tones of our heritage. In that state, many of us have forgotten the very names and meanings our forebears passed down. Today's revival among African-descended peoples toward Judaism, or toward rediscovering the 12 tribes, is part of a broader effort to break the layered spells cast over us. The story of Abraham, for instance, has been reshaped so many times, rendered in Greek, Aramaic, Arabic, English, by those who control the language, that the man who first crossed over, a Hebrew title meaning one who crosses, and the Afro-Asiatic roots of his people have become obscured. What survives is a mythologized version divorced from its true context. True liberation demands more than adopting borrowed doctrines. It requires a return to the original doctrines inscribed on temple walls in Egypt and Mesopotamia, predating Abraham's sojourn. It means learning the real ancient languages, pictographic Egyptian, Akkadian, Proto-Hebrew, Sanskrit, and recovering the cosmologies they encoded, the zodiac's 12 constellations, the Great Pyramids mirroring Orion's belt, the Lord's Prayer echoing Egyptian invocations. Reclaiming ourselves also means unlearning the distortions of conquest cultures. For centuries, invaders have used gifts and peace offerings as a formula for domination, buying obedience while rewriting meanings. Whenever we've tried to share our knowledge, they've taken our definitions, of words, of rituals, of symbols, and inverted them, turning light into darkness, good into evil. Hence, a spelling bee in English tests origin because English itself is a hybrid bastard tongue, fused from the languages of its subjects. So our task is twofold: internally, to reinstate our latent senses through meditation, dream work, and disciplined study of self, and externally, to awaken our communities by unraveling the layers of linguistic and cultural subjugation, restoring the pure teachings of our ancestors. Only then can we truly see beyond the veil, communicate on our original channels, and live again in the harmony of our natural frequencies. Paganism is often used as a catch-all label to dismiss any spiritual system that doesn't fit within the familiar frameworks of Judaism, Christianity, or Islam. In reality, the ancient Egyptians weren't pagans in the sense of worshipping demons or imaginary gods, but rather honoring their ancestors and observing rituals tied to natural forces and the divine order they perceived around them. When Europeans first encountered Egyptian civilization, with its monumental temples, intricately carved statues and advanced knowledge of irrigation, architecture and astronomy, they assumed such achievements must be the work of deities rather than human ingenuity, and so declared them false gods. In so doing, they overlaid their own terminology and biases onto an already rich culture that obeyed its own laws, morals and practices. This tendency to impose external judgments on another culture's traditions is much like a stranger dictating how you should cook your eggs or raise your children. It ignores the lived experience, the family dynamics and the historical continuity that give meaning to those practices. The Europeans called their system democracy and applied it wherever they went, under the guise of bringing freedom, but often to facilitate trade, conscript labor, indoctrinate local populations and dismantle existing belief systems, replacing them with Starbucks, Walmarts and Christian churches. At the heart of this distortion is the very word religion, which many of the original practitioners, whether Jewish, Muslim or Egyptian, would not have used to describe their own way of life. For them, worship and ritual were inseparable from daily existence. Offerings to Isis or Osiris were acts of familial devotion, not homage to supernatural beings. Ancestral veneration, for example, speaking to deceased grandparents, keeping their photographs or heirlooms intact, was labeled pagan by outsiders, even though it functions identically to the way monotheists pray to prophets or saints. In both cases, one is communicating with those who have passed on, seeking guidance or support, only the names differ. Misunderstandings deepened as translators hastily assigned Egyptian deities Greek or Roman names. Thoth became Hermes, Isis became Aphrodite, without grasping the original meanings. Over centuries, these names accrued mythologies and moral judgments alien to the Egyptians themselves. Thus, when the white man came to Africa and Egypt and saw images of gods, he assumed literal deity worship rather than recognizing stylized portraits of revered teachers or ancestors. Judaism, Christianity and Islam all trace their roots back to ancient Semitic traditions, and ultimately to Egypt as well. Abraham sojourned in Egypt, Moses was schooled in Pharaoh's court. Jesus spent his early years there. Muhammad's lineage includes Hagar, an Egyptian maiden. Yet followers of these faiths often scorn the place of their prophet's upbringing, branding Egyptian customs as demonic while embracing parallel rituals, circumcision, animal sacrifice, prayer postures, that originated on the Nile. Even the Bible and the Quran contain astonishingly similar elements to what modern audiences consider fantasy: dragons, talking trees, multi-headed beasts, seven-horned water monsters. These motifs stem from pagan mythologies that the Roman Catholic Church later absorbed and reinterpreted, embedding them in Christian lore, and then condemning them as pagan when encountered elsewhere. Genetic and evolutionary claims have also been employed to assert cultural supremacy. Europeans argued that skin color, hair texture or facial features resulted from climate-driven adaptation as their ancestors migrated out of Africa and froze in the Caucasus. But these explanations falter under scrutiny. Why, for instance, do some Arctic-dwelling animals exhibit dark pigmentation? Or why do African jungle species under extreme heat show no loosening of hair texture? And how can straight hair become tightly coiled without invoking a unique genetic mechanism? Scientific inquiry into blood types, A, B, AB, O, and Rh factors, reveals no credible model for gradual mutation into new types merely by geographic relocation. In truth, human diversity reflects a tapestry of migrations, interbreeding and selective pressures over millennia. When outside groups, be they the biblical Anunnaki, the pharaoh's instructors or modern colonizers, encountered local populations, they would intermix and impart technologies, languages and beliefs. Statues of revered ancestors or teachers are, in essence, early photographic efforts to preserve likenesses. Over generations, these images were venerated as if gods, and their creators labeled pagan for doing no more than honoring their forebears. Thus the entire narrative of paganism versus monotheism is a tangled web spun by those who are unfamiliar with another culture's worldview. Whether through religious texts, colonial edicts or academic theories, the white man has recast African heritage as demonic, even as he borrowed and rebranded its core elements, rituals, symbols, moral codes, to fortify his own doctrines. Recognizing this misappropriation allows us to see ancient Egyptian practice for what it was: a coherent, complex spirituality rooted in family lineage, natural cycles and a profound respect for the unseen forces that bind humanity across time. Over the centuries, countless seekers have awaited the coming of the Messiah, often conflating that title with the historical figure of Jesus of Nazareth. In fact, Messiah is neither originally Hebrew nor uniquely tied to a single individual. It derives from the Egyptian word Mesha, and was applied to a succession of divine figures, from Osiris onward. Each of these messiahs embodied a fusion of mortal and cosmic lineage. Their fathers were said to be part extraterrestrial, part divine hermaphrodite, and their births were heralded as the union of heaven and earth. One of the most famous iterations of this myth is Hiram Abif, whose story was appropriated by medieval Masons. According to Masonic lore, Hiram was betrayed, 3 attacks to the head by fellow craftsmen who sought to extract his master word, the secret formula for building the temple. His ritualized death and the subsequent grief of his brothers James and Judas became the central drama of the Third Degree, a symbolic tale of death and resurrection that echoes the wider cycle of messianic myth. When we look at the Hebrew scriptures today, Messiah has been narrowed to mean anointed one, yet its prophecies remain unfulfilled in their original cosmic scope. The New Testament promises that Jesus would return swiftly, a little while. John's Gospel insists, yet 2,000 years have passed without his visible descent. In divine time, a day is like 1,000 years, so perhaps those 2 millennia have merely constituted this little while. Still, human impatience grows. We anticipate signs in the heavens, alignments of distant stars, and every 25,000-year precession cycle that, in theory, should herald a new epoch. Meanwhile, our world writhes under floods, tornadoes, earthquakes, and political upheavals, cataclysms foretold by the ancient prophets, now repeated in every generation. The institutional church, once the steward of divine glory, seems to have lost its way, its authority waning as nature itself reclaims dominion. Christmas, once a celebration of cosmic birth, now feels like an expired ritual, its power dissipated in empty carols and hollow nativity plays. Yet beyond the walls of any organized faith lies a more personal calling, to reconnect with the living spirit that courses through all creation. The earth, the trees, the cycles of day and night, they are not mere background for our dramas, but living testimony to the same creative force that animated every one of those ancient messiahs. To restore our bond with that force, we must shed the superstitions and manipulations, the mental enslavement that reduces miracles to fairy tales and prophets to salesmen. God did not intend us to worship dead words, dead people, or the hollow rites that keep us comforted but stagnant. Instead, the invitation is to embrace a living faith, to recognize that the Spirit breathed into Adam, into Osiris, into Hiram, and into Jesus, is the same Spirit pulsing in your own heart. Once you reclaim that divine spark, you are no longer merely a spectator waiting for the end, you become a co-creator in the ongoing unfolding of the universe, heirs to an eternal life that transcends birth, death, and even the cycle of millennia. We must never forget that we have greatness in our DNA. Remember Hannibal Barca, whose very name, Hannibal, means Ba-al has given me grace, was not only celebrated as Carthage's greatest statesman and general but also a devoted worshipper of the deity Ba-al. Born in 247 BC as Hannibal el-Hanu, he hailed from the Phoenician colony of Carthage, founded in the 9th century BC by settlers from the Levant, what the Greeks called Phoenicia, or land of palm trees, spanning modern Lebanon, Syria, and Israel. The term Phoenician itself derives from the Greek phoenix, meaning purple or indigo, a nod to the famed dye produced and prized throughout the Mediterranean. This rich, staining pigment also gave rise to the nomadic Tuareg, blue people of the Sahara, whose indigo-dyed robes continue to wash a striking hue onto their skin. Carthage, Cart-Hadast, the new city in Punic, stood on the North African coast near today's Tunis, a nexus of maritime trade and military power. Under Hannibal's father, Hamilcar Barca, Carthage expanded across Iberia, and it was Hamilcar who compelled young Hannibal to vow eternal enmity against Rome. True to this oath, Hannibal led a legendary march in 218 BC, across the Pyrenees and the Alps with an army of some 149,000 men, 200 horses, and 21 war elephants, striking at Rome itself. His victories at the Trebia, Lake Trasimene, and Cannae showcased tactical brilliance. He repeatedly outmaneuvered and outflanked forces far larger than his own, earning him renown as one of history's greatest military strategists. The influence of Carthage and its Phoenician culture extended throughout North Africa and into Sicily, Sardinia, Corsica, and even the Iberian Peninsula. Following the Punic Wars, the Romans would destroy Carthage in 146 BC, yet the legacy of these seafaring traders and warriors endured, in language, art, and lineage. Some scholars trace the wanderings of Phoenician-descended peoples into sub-Saharan Africa, linking them to groups such as the Moors of the Western Sahara and the Sahel, and even to indigenous communities in the southeastern United States, Cherokee, Yamasee, Yamasee, and Gullah peoples, who preserved indigo-dyed traditions and oral histories of blue-clad ancestors. Beyond the Mediterranean, connections are drawn, though debated, between these ancient North African and Levantine diasporas and the genealogies recorded in Genesis 10. Eber, son of Shem, Cush, and Mizraim, sons of Ham, and Lud, from whom the Lydians and possibly the Philistines descended. Libyan dynasts, notably the 22nd dynasty pharaohs of Egypt, claimed descent from Meshwesh tribes, likely akin to Barca's Libyans, underscoring the fluid, overlapping identities of Egyptian, Libyan, and Phoenician in antiquity. In later traditions, the intertwining of Carthaginian and biblical narratives yields rich mythologies. Ba-al is a high god among the sons of Elohim, the Nephilim's union with human women, the morning star, Helel ben Sahar, of Isaiah 14:12 interpreted by some as Lucifer, and the symbolic contrast between the indigo dark morning and the dawning light of Yeshua, bright and morning star, Revelation 22:16. Whether exploring the inheritance of melanin-rich peoples who revered the sun's life-giving warmth, or pondering the blue-black mysteries of ancient dyes, Hannibal's story remains inseparable from the broader tapestry of Mediterranean and Near Eastern history, a saga of devotion, defiance, diaspora, and enduring cultural exchange. Tammuz is a Sumerian name meaning sprout of life or sprout forth, composed of Tam, meaning perfect, and Uz, meaning to burn. In many traditions, Tammuz is understood as the equivalent of Yeshua, Isa, or Jesus of the three monotheistic religions, and has also been known by names such as Horus, Christos, Adonai, and Yahweh. In Genesis 4:26, it is written, "To Seth also there was born a son, and he called his name Enos. Then began men to call upon the name of the existing one, the living one, the Lord." In Ezekiel 8:14, Tammuz is again invoked. "Then he brought me to the door of the gate of the Lord's house which was toward the north, and behold, there sat women weeping for Tammuz." According to ancient lore, Tammuz was appointed by Anu as a master, Yahweh, and entrusted with guiding humanity back to the path of righteousness. He was believed to have both divine and human nature, making him uniquely qualified to judge and to reconcile human beings with the Most High, the Sustainer. His parents were Dumuzi, he whose son is life, master of the earth, and Inanna, granddaughter of Enlil, master of the sky. Tammuz's story intertwines with that of his uncle Marduk, also called Michael or Melchizedek, who by accident slew his father and was wrongfully condemned. Imprisoned in the Great Pyramid, the lofty house, Marduk was later released, lived in exile, and then rose to supreme rulership, bearing titles such as Lugal-Diri, Master of the Deities of Heaven and Earth, Michael the Archangel, and Melchizedek. His deliverance and elevation symbolize the triumph of divine justice and are echoed in Jude 1:9. Yet Michael the Archangel, in contending with the devil, disputed about the body of Moses. He did not bring against him a railing accusation, but said, "The Lord rebuke you." These myths, predating the Holy Bible, are depicted in ancient Egyptian and Sumerian art, portraying ebony-skinned, nappy-haired people alongside reptilian and serpent figures. The serpent in Eden, for instance, represents a draconian being who predated the crash of Nibiru and lived beneath the waters. In Sumerian lore, Anu's two sons, one half draconian, are mirrored in Egyptian myths as Shu, the god of air, and Tefnut, goddess of moisture, parents of Geb, earth, and Nut, sky, from whom sprang Osiris, Asar, Isis, Set, Suchuk, and Nephthys, founders of pre-dynastic Egypt. The Anunnaki, those who from Anu came, are recognized as the divine architects of ancient cities along the Nile, Eridu, Yor, Kish, Nippur, and others, and as progenitors of humanity. Their descendants, the Anu people, built and ruled Egypt from pre-dynastic times through the dynamic interplay of foreign and local dynasties. The Scorpion King and later pharaohs maintained ties of blood and doctrine with these supreme beings, as did the Kushite dynasties to the south. In the Holy Scriptures, vestiges of these names and deities appear under new guises. Nergal, Bel, Nebo, Dagon, and Tammuz himself are mentioned in Kings, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel. In the New Testament's Acts 2:19, the Greek phrase thoma en urano, wonders in heaven, echoes the Sumerian Anu for heaven. Likewise, the promise in Acts 2:17 of the Spirit poured out in the last days recalls the ancient outpourings of divine breath that first animated mankind in Genesis 2:7. Thus, from the flood of Noah onward, the lineage and teachings of the Anunnaki were carried by Shem, Ham, and Japheth into re-established cities across Africa and beyond. Egypt, far older than even Sumer, was the cradle of civilization, its pre-dynastic Anu people later known in the Bible as Cush, the land of Ethiopia. Over millennia, their doctrines have morphed into Hebrew, Islamic, and Samaritan faiths, yet at the core remains the worship of the Most High, Anu, Elohim, Allah, under various names and forms. Humanity itself is said to be a convergence of races, pygmies, dwarfs, Olmecs, Nephilim, Jinn, angels, descended from extraterrestrial seed. These mighty men or Gibor in Genesis 6:4, part human and part divine, established the first empires in Mesopotamia and beyond. The tree of knowledge, the serpent, and the flood myths all echo the presence of these pre-flood visitors. Psalm 82:6 declares, "I said, you are gods, and all of you are children of the Most High." Yet Genesis 6:3 warns that their days, and hours, are finite. "My spirit shall not strive with man forever, for he is flesh, his days shall be 120 years. The cycle of human history, tied to equinoxes and great ages of 6,000 years each, reflects the Earth's circumference and its cosmic rhythms. Today, as the ancient outpouring of spirit returns in the last days, seekers are urged to look beyond the 3,000-year-old Bible to the far more ancient tablets, Enuma Elish, the Gilgamesh epic, the descent of Ishtar, the Ark tablet, and to the walls of Egyptian temples, where the true saga of Anu and his divine progeny has been inscribed for over 10,000 years. Only by reclaiming this heritage can humanity rediscover its destiny as children of the light, guided once more by Tammuz, the sprout of life, and by the divine breath that first made us living souls. Absolute nature is the one supreme being, infinite in space and time, without beginning or end, omnipotent and omniscient. Though countless gods exist, only nature absolute is the all-in-all, the inseparable unity of space, matter, and mind, encompassing past, present, and future. All spirit beings, from angels to deities, are but aspects of this boundless reality. Matter is defined as anything occupying space. Its true essence reveals that spirit beings, gods, and goddesses must also be part of absolute nature, subject to its laws through the interplay of nothingness, vacuum, and matter energized by brain forces, reason, instinct, and the cycles of existence. Reason is a supreme entity generated by brains, the metaphysical seeds of thought and consciousness. Though brains and their reason cannot be seen with the naked eye or microscope, we experience them through perception, emotion, and intellect. Brains transmute raw matter into active energy, shaping the artificial and natural worlds alike. Reason, the dynamic mind energy, conceives all forms, deciding their shape, substance, and purpose before matter takes the shape of persons or things. Different levels of reason exist, culminating in the cosmic or constant reason, whose opposites, Lupu and Zeus, reside in the upper hemisphere of the cosmic circle. Brahmos, in the lower hemisphere, serves as the secondary force that refines and evolves creation. Logos, the ethereal science of Newton and pantheism, and pantheon, the ethereal science of other traditions, flow from these primal forces. Sound right reason, Noon, is the Supreme Being's best mind, producing the positive knowledge and cosmic rhythm that sustain all life within infinite heat and nature. Noon unites male and female principles, guiding evolution through cycles of destruction and rebirth. There are 5 principal levels of gods and goddesses within absolute nature, the one Supreme Being, absolute nature itself, infinite and eternal. The cosmic deities, primal gods and goddesses born from brainless brains and reason, who shape galaxies, stars, and universes. Spirit gods and goddesses, emanations concentrated at the centers of cosmic bodies. These beings govern conditions, blessings, and curses that influence earthly lives. Original flesh and blood deities, emerging from Mother Earth's clay, these primordial humans once inhabited the cosmic circle's upper half. They birthed the African race by natural procreation, later dissolving back into the earth, only to reappear as diverse peoples and animals. Finally, demigods and goddesses, lesser spirit beings born of cosmic reproduction, capable of incarnation, reincarnation, and spiritual influence through chosen human vessels. Divine royalty flows through bloodlines and spiritual kinship. Natural-born kings, queens, priests, and priestesses learn and practice nature's laws when the time comes, guiding humanity as cycles shift from one cosmic season to the next. The African race descends directly from those original flesh and blood deities of the Nile source in equatorial Africa, earning the name Ethiopian race. Our spiritual science, Noon, is the knowledge of sound right reason passed down from those first creators. Nuku, the primal reason, and Noon, the science of reason, are the positive powers we must embrace to resurrect minds from ignorance of nature's laws. Truth is correct information, knowledge about persons, places, and things, and it extends beyond religion into every field of existence. Yet the most vital truth for the mental dead, those unaware of their cosmic origins, their ethnic heritage, and the Supreme Being's laws, is the truth of absolute nature and its requirements for survival, harmony, and liberation from racism, disease, and poverty. As it is written, the truth will set you free. Noon is that liberating truth. Creating does not mean producing something from nothing. It means forming, growing, and structuring from existing matter through the activity of brains and reason. The prime movers, brains in matter, respond spontaneously and efficaciously to conditions, motivated by nature's laws and cycles. They are in the water we drink, the food we eat, and the air we breathe. In mind, they become reason. In spirit, they become the ethereal powers that animate the universe. In form, they become the light of consciousness. Thus, the Creator sees and inhabits all matter to some degree, weaving the cosmos from the raw fabric of absolute nature. Although we cannot see brains with the naked eye, and even under a microscope we cannot observe the subtleties of taste, touch, hearing, smell, and thought, brains are nothing less than miraculous. They are magnetic and spontaneous, yet effortless, particles of matter that give rise to mind and creativity, the ultimate sources of inspiration and innovation. With this in mind, let us explore the laws and cycles of nature, the forces that govern both the cosmos and our own lives. A law of nature is a consistent characteristic or standard by which nature always behaves. Whenever a given condition arises, nature responds in precisely the same way. For example, if atmospheric pressure drops, the weather turns cloudy or windy. When pressure rises, skies clear and the sun shines. Water, wherever it is, flows until it finds its level. These predictable, unvarying behaviors are the very essence of nature's laws. Though spirit beings may sometimes interfere, helping or hindering human affairs for their own purposes, they cannot alter these laws permanently. Cycles of nature are networks of such laws arranged to complete circuits of action. Each cycle consists of a sequence of natural laws that work together to carry a process from beginning to end. We experience countless smaller cycles. Day follows night, sleep precedes awakening, labor leads to exhaustion, all of which are subcircuits within greater cycles. In turn, cycles combine into broader degrees of nature, and degrees make up circles of nature, reflected in the movements of stars, planets, and moons. One prime example is the SMAC circle, an acronym for space, matter, and, of, cosmic, or clock, time, a 720-degree circuit representing all existence, the upper hemisphere of light and creation, the lower of darkness and dissolution, each quarter marking phases of revolution, origination, progression, and evolution. Of all the immutable laws of nature, two affect human beings most profoundly, the law of pleasure and pain, and the law of kindred or bloodline. Pleasure and pain are opposites that must balance each other. More pleasure yields less suffering, just as increased pain heightens our subsequent joy and accomplishment. Meanwhile, the law of bloodline holds that what happens to one member of a species or race affects the entire lineage. Good deeds uplift the whole, while misdeeds invite collective responsibility until restored to balance, so we are indeed our brother's keeper, bound by shared nature and heritage. Because these laws govern us so fundamentally, those who understand them can, through the SMAT circle of order and with the aid of enlightened spirit beings, reconstruct the past and glimpse the future. By tracing the circle's degrees, counterclockwise from one point around and back, wise observers discern that past and future are but segments of the same continuum. What has been will be again, and what will be has once occurred. This cyclical view equips us to build mental frameworks of origin, progression, and destiny, guiding both education and spiritual growth. Our own human history, too, must be seen through this lens. Long before Columbus discovered the Americas in 1492, members of what we now call the Ethiopian or African race had visited, inhabited, and taught all corners of Mother Earth. The Moors of antiquity, Phoenicians and Ethiopians, were masters of water, hydraulics, and monumental construction. They laid out cities such as Washington, D.C., and left symbols of their civilization across the continents. Over eons, spirit forces and evolutionary cycles shifted power among the world's races, leading to the descent of the African race into its current state of oppression, a trajectory foreseen by nature's grand cycles. Yet this does not spell permanent subjugation. The original gods and goddesses who coexisted with nature's laws created us and then withdrew, allowing us to forge our own path. Now is the time for the African race to reclaim its spiritual science, its true culture, rooted in sound right reason, the cosmic mind energy emanating from the sun centers of the universes. Reason, neither a mere spirit nor a distant deity, but the best mind of absolute nature itself, changes our atmosphere and thought. It is the key to mental resurrection from ignorance, the cure for curses of false religion, and the foundation for liberation. To embrace this true culture is to recognize that matter, space, and time are infinite and inseparable. Nothing can be made from nothing. Every creation arises from pre-existing material through brain particles, microscopic prime movers of matter whose magic magnetizes and organizes the ingredients of life. When conditions align, right materials, temperature, and environmental laws, these particles spontaneously assemble into growing organisms, guided by the same laws that govern rivers, weather, and celestial bodies. Understanding these principles equips us to follow nature's examples, to grow without limit, like the universe itself, which began by conception, gestation, and expansion. Growth is nature's method of creation, and absolute nature is the limitless organism within which countless beings come into being. By recognizing the unity of all space, matter, and time, we see that gods and goddesses are themselves creations of nature, no more omnipotent than ourselves, but expressions of matter's creative power. Finally, the call to action is clear. The African race must build a power base of its own philosophy, spirituality, and science. We must reclaim the right side spirits of the SMAT circle, those forces of light and progress that once guided our ancestors. Through knowledge of our identity, our heritage, and the laws and cycles that govern existence, we can achieve mental, spiritual, and physical freedom. Let us put meat on the bones of our culture from the right side of the circle, nourishing ourselves with positive knowledge and returning to a state of rightful power and unity with absolute nature. Let this understanding be remembered always and be known. Nature creates gods, gods do not create nature, and in that truth lies our path to liberation.